Yep.
Cool. Um,
Thank you, everyone. Today I'd like to call to order the City Council discussion of proposed changes to the Lincoln City budget as of August 10th, 2020. As always, in the back, in the northwest corner of the room, by the press room, by Riley Johnson, is the Open Meetings Act. And we'll start with our Finance Director, Mr. Kaufman.
Hi, so just want to do a quick reminder, if I can get this to work.
It's working now.
Okay. We're 14 days out from budget adoption day, so today we're having discussion on any proposed final changes. Zoom in here. Wednesday with a final vote on those changes. And then, as I've talked about before, we always get valuations before the final day. So there's typically some amendments to come out at the end that are changes based off of receiving those final valuations. So those final valuations are typically received on the 20th. And then we'll prepare any potential amendments that come before the City Council for adoption on the 24th. In addition, all the items that were delayed from the public hearing night on the 3rd will come back to the City Council on the 24th for consideration at that time. So that's the remaining schedule for the budget. In addition, there's also, just so you're aware, in September after the budget's adopted, there's also the levying of the taxes where you certify the tax levy to the county board who puts those on the tax roll. So that's the full budget process for the remaining of this year.
Okay.
In addition, you have one proposal that's been received. You should all have a copy of that in front of you, putting that on the screen. So resolution 90340, that's the resolution that kind of guides the budget process that the council put together, I think about 3 years ago now. So Councilmember Washington proposed utilizing a maximum of $100,000 of general fund property taxes to fund library and parks and recreation after school programs if assessed valuation comes in higher than the 2.49% that is currently projected. So like I said, we always do projections on the budget. So typically the assessor's office comes out early or late January and says, here's where we think valuations are going overall. And they'll give very broad indications at that time of where they think residential properties are going or commercial property valuations are going. And then they go through the informal appeal process, and then by March they submit a report to the state. So we typically get that report, look at it, and then make some assumptions on valuations based on where they're at in March. But there's still a formal process that they go through, so there's always tweaks from January valuations to the August 20th date. So included in the budget is a 2.49% increase that has, I think, some estimates for commercial residential valuations, which make up the bulk of all evaluations of the city. If you look at valuation by type, so this is the category type. So you can see residential makes up 67%, commercial makes up 28%, and then you have personal property, and then centrally assessed. So centrally assessed is properties assessed by the state for railroads or gas companies, other types of items that they do at the state level. So primarily we did some estimates for increases more on the commercial area, and included some estimated increases as well for residential, but primarily that's based off of new construction in the community, because residential had a revaluation increase last year, and commercial is looking at a revaluation increase in the current year. So right now we have a 2.49% estimate. We'll know very soon what that's going to be. So I'm going to stop and turn it back over to the council, I guess, to discuss any changes.
Okay.
Thank you, Director Kaufman. And so I am offering a proposal that would be contingent upon where the valuations come in. So that's what Brandon was discussing. So if our valuations were to come in higher than 2.49% and we would gain more revenue, I am proposing that we take that first $100,000 and direct it toward after-school program for library and parks. And the reason I am doing this is because in light of the fact that we are returning to school during this pandemic, and with some awareness that the majority of the families who have elected to have their children stay out of school or do school online are in lower income neighborhoods. And they themselves are at lower income. The reasons they're giving are that they don't have health insurance and are concerned about their children contracting or carrying the virus home when their family's circumstances are such that they wouldn't be able to financially bear the cost of that. And I know that we have a separate jurisdiction than LPS. LPS has their own budget, but what we could do in the city to be of assistance is to augment the after-school programs of both libraries and the Parks and Recs Department, because those are safe places for children that have Wi-Fi access that would give them, I believe, the supports they would need to do their school from home, or at least not at the school, remain safe, and still have those kinds of services which I believe they need. But again, it is a contingent request only if valuations come in at greater than 2.49% as budgeted.
Any questions? Comments? I have one. Maybe this would be for Brandon, if you could come up. Do we actually amend the budget then to increase the budget $100,000 at this point, or?
Yeah, so we would likely have some type of amendment. So if this discussion today, vote on Wednesday, if that passes, if valuations come in higher, then we're going to be coming back to the council with a substitute amendment on budget adoption night to adjust the budget higher to increase for before and after school programs.
Okay. And, okay, that's what I was wondering how that would work. At that point, though, we would be, okay, we'd be increasing our budget above and beyond what we had originally. My other question then for Sandra is, or probably for my board is, do we feel like we need to increase our budget for this purpose? I mean, we've asked the other departments to lower their estimates, lower their deal. A lot of them we're still waiting on the employees of the city of Lincoln to forgive some of their increase. And so we've told them we don't have the money. And now we figured we've got money and we're going to use it for this program. and not for their salaries. So for me, this is probably not a good move to do at this point. I think we can wait until the end, until the 24th, to see where we stand. But I still think if we're on such a tight budget, why are we deciding to spend more, is my big thought on this.
I don't believe there's a decision to spend more unless there is more.
If there is more, we've got a lot of, excuse me. I'm sorry.
Well, it's fine.
No, there's a lot of other needs out there that we've asked everybody to cut back on their salary increases, cut back other places that I think that probably they could use the money to go towards that if we need to. And our departments had a $7 million cut. Is what we decided that we made them take. And a good portion of that is salaries. And so I'm thinking that that would be a good spot for this, if we had some extra money. My other thought on this whole thing is we set a budget, then we go ask the county to set a mill levy to match that budget. But then all of a sudden there's extra money at the end, and whose money is it? I mean, it's the taxpayers' money that we're gonna ask them to give us more so we could budget more. And I've had this discussion before over the years, many times with the LPS board too. And instead of setting a levy, we should set a budget, then the levy will match that budget. Instead of deciding how much money we are gonna get, then decide what the budget will be. But the budget might be a lot higher though. We may be looking at increases to the mill levy if that came about. But those are my thoughts. Yes.
I appreciate Councilwoman Washington starting this conversation because I think that even starting this conversation shows that we can be reactive and responsive to the needs of the community. And knowing that we are kind of going back into a different situation this school year than we did last year, and knowing that especially students and families in certain areas of our city could benefit more from strong before and after school programming and libraries. I think that starting a conversation is a very responsible thing to do, and I appreciate the leadership in at least starting a conversation about this.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So I too appreciate Councilwoman Washington's courage given our budget times, but it's giving me pause. I don't mind waiting till August 20th till we get the valuations in, but I have to say, having set aside some of my own legislative priorities when we hit COVID and some other challenges we have, not the least of which was a housing advocate that I was feeling really strongly about. And earlier this year, it is a balance. I'd have to concur with our chair that it's given me some pause, but I don't mind waiting to see what things look like on the 20th and reevaluate at that time because there are so many needs and we've asked our departments to do a lot. And so I just want to say that, and we've talked about this off the dais, so just so the rest of you know where I'm coming from, it's we have a lot of things that we all want to do, but I think we just really need to be mindful of what we've asked others to do within city government. And it's pretty lean times, so thank you.
Can I ask a question of Brandon?
Yeah, please do.
Director Kaufman, I want to loop back to address something that Chairman McGinnis said. If the valuations were to come back at 2.5, where does the overage go? Does it get returned to the taxpayer?
So that's always a discussion, I think, on the amendment at budget night. So like I said, with Chairman Guinness, if you leave the budget flat, you don't make any changes, then the tax rate drops because valuations come in higher. If you amend the budget up and increase the budget at that time, then you'll receive more revenues. Tax rate stays the same because valuations came in higher, which generates more revenue. So I guess it depends on the outcome, I guess, of what if there are amendments on the night. I think In previous budget cycles, it's typically been the tax rate stays flat. So last budget cycle, I think the amendment that came to the council at the time of adoption was they wanted to reserve money for streets. And so we put a clause in there that the budget was increased, the money was dedicated for streets. However, there was a clause that said if revenues weren't met, then we wouldn't transfer the funds for streets. So since overall revenues weren't met, we didn't end up transferring that money for the streets. So that's been kind of some past practice just from previous budget cycles.
Councilman Christensen.
And I've done this a couple times, and the way it's been is, with the one exception that you pointed out, the levy must be set to match the budget, whether that means the levy needs to be increased or decreased. And we have decreased the levy to meet the budget, and we have increased the levy to meet the budget. So whichever it is, wherever the budget finally lands, that's where we set the levy to match it. So if we have more, if the levy as currently stands would produce more money than we have budgeted for, we will reduce the levy to match.
Yeah, so if you,
Or the rest of the
This will
budget.
be it.
two actions, one you have budget adoption that you have to go through, and then you actually adopt the levy amount or the tax rate amount. So that the budget adoption happens August 24th. Once you get to September, where you're actually adopting the tax rate and setting or certifying the levy, that's at that point is a ministerial action. So you functionally have to vote for that based on the adopted budget. And I think that's based off of some previous
Experiences.
Ha, whoops, sorry.
Legal conversations.
yeah.
Any other comments? Do we want to vote on this resolution then?
So I
No.
think today's the discussion, and then we've got a 3 p.m. meeting set on Wednesday for the actual vote.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah, no.
okay. Anything else we'd like to discuss? Okay, seeing none, this meeting will be adjourned, and we have a 2 o'clock meeting in here for the directors. Thank you.
Yep. Go Team Council.